Everyone, Derived Energy reporting live from Jakarta, Indonesia. I'm going to make a response video to a video called It's My Right to Choose Life, made by a certain ThingTooCoolForYou, and I posted a few comments on a video, and she promptly blocked me just because I expressed my opinion that she doesn't have a right to create sentient beings who will suffer and die for her own edification and gratification. And I think the video title, "It's My Right to Choose Life," is a bit of a misnomer, really, because this is supposed to be a video on antinatalism, anti-procreation. So it's not to do with choosing life for yourself. I mean, nobody's saying you haven't got a choice to live, I'm going to shoot you, bang. No, that's not what the antinatalism debate is about. Antinatalism is a philosophy that attaches a negative value judgment towards procreation. So a more apt title for your video might have been, "It's my right to create sentient beings who will suffer and die for my own gratification." That would be a more appropriate video title for your title, since you're discussing antinatalism. Anyway, let's play your video.
First place. So my biggest issue with this whole antinatalism thing is the idea that because there's suffering, that means that the elimination of all life on the planet is justified. How exactly?
Well, you know what they say, where there's a will, there's a way. I mean, futurologists such as Ray Kurzweil have seriously put forward the idea that there's no actual theoretical impediment to saturating the entire universe with sentience. Now, if that's possible, then the little chore of destroying the planet and rendering it inhospitable and unamenable to life is child's play. I mean, after all, the Earth is just a pale blue dot, in the vast ocean of space. It's just a little mote of dust. It's quite feasible that in the next few centuries we will have developed the sort of technology that would be required to just obliterate, destroy, annihilate the planet. It's just a big piece of rock at the end of the day. Perhaps our technology is not quite up to the task as things stand in the early 21st century, but as we all know, technology is increasing exponentially, and we will have technology that we can only dream about at the moment.
Exactly. There seems to be an inherent misunderstanding that suffering is somehow avoidable, because by ending all life on the planet, you'll therefore eliminate suffering, and that's good. It's not.
Well, we're just reading from completely different pages here, and I feel fully entitled to take the moral high ground here, because I think that preventing future suffering is a good thing. I think preventing, eliminating, and reducing pain and suffering that is being or will be experienced in the future, or might be experienced in the future, is a positive thing to do. And in your life, when you suffer, you try to eliminate or reduce your own suffering. So I as an antinatalist, am merely using that kind of motivation to inform my stance towards how I see, a better state of affairs on this planet. And a better state of affairs on this planet is the less sentient beings there are on it, the less amount of pain and suffering that will be experienced on this planet. So that's why I'm an antinatalist, because I want to put forward the idea that procreation is a morally dubious and problematic endeavour that creates sentient beings who suffer and die needlessly when, if they're not born, they're not deprived, just as if you look on the planet Mars, there's no sentient beings who are being deprived of anything, and there's no pain, suffering, or prospect of death. So, yeah, Mars is a good state of in a good state of affairs in relation to this troubled and blighted planet.
Because by ending all life on the planet, suffering is honestly, you know, I'm tired. I'm mumbling, jumbling my words up. Suffering is a necessity.
Yes, suffering is a necessity if you're an organism and you want to survive, because it's like a warning system, you know, that informs you when your life is in danger. But the thing is, because suffering is a necessity in life, it's best not to create the lives in which suffering is a necessity.
It's a part of life, just as pleasure is.
Again, it's a part of life. So why create more life when you know that suffering is inevitably a part of it? It doesn't seem a very compassionate thing to do.
And Heron Church, I did notice, said, not in so many words, but he did say that essentially, you know, pleasure is the absence of suffering, pleasure is the absence of pain. Yes, to a degree. But what about the masochists? What about the people that gain pleasure from pain?
I mean, this is just such an off-the-cuff comment, and I can see that you haven't actually sat down and contemplated masochism and thought seriously and ruminated on any kind of, you know, way in which masochism can be used to undermine antinatalist arguments. So let's have a look at what I can find on masochism personality disorder. It's also known as self-defeating personality disorder. And self-defeating personality disorder is a pervasive pattern of self-defeating behavior beginning by early adulthood and present in a variety of contexts. The person may often avoid or undermine pleasurable experiences, be drawn to situations or relationships in which he or she will suffer, and prevent others from helping him, as indicated by at least 5 of the following. 1. Chooses people and situations that lead to disappointment, failure, or mistreatment, even when better options are clearly available. 2. Rejects or renders ineffective the attempts of others to help him or her. 3. Following positive personal events, e.g. new achievement, responds with depression, guilt, or a behavior that produces pain, for example an accident. 4. Incites angry or rejecting responses from others and then feels hurt, defeated, or humiliated. For example, makes fun of spouse in public, provoking an angry retort, then feels devastated. 5. Rejects opportunities for pleasure, or is reluctant to acknowledge enjoying himself or herself despite having adequate social skills and the capacity for pleasure. 6. Fails to accomplish tasks crucial to his or her personal objectives despite demonstrated ability to do so. For example, helps fellow students write papers but is unable to write his or her own. 7. Is uninterested in or rejects people who consistently treat him or her well. For example, is unattracted to caring sexual partners. 8. Engages in excessive self-sacrifice that is unsolicited by the intended recipients of the sacrifice. B. The behaviors in A do not occur exclusively in response to or in anticipation of being physically, sexually, or psychologically abused. C. The behaviors in A do not occur only when the person is depressed. Now that we've presented a bit of background on masochistic personality disorder, is this the kind of sentient being that you would like to create? Would you push your chest out in pride and swell up with pride if you created a sentient being with those lists of symptoms? Would you? Do you think you can create a sentient being who happens to be a masochist, and you're statistically unlikely to be a masochist? But let's say, you created a sentient being and they're a masochist. Would that alleviate your guilt if they were unhappy with their life? Would you see their masochism as somehow absolving you from guilt if your child was unhappy with their existence? I don't think you would. I think this is just an off-the-cuff comment that you made that you really haven't thought through clearly, have you? I don't think you have.
And it seems to me that to be antinatalist and to want to kill yourself, what about the people that you leave behind? Are they not going to suffer when you die?
Of course, if you commit suicide, then the loved ones you leave behind will suffer. And this is another point in favour of antinatalism, even though you're trying to present it as if it's in favour of pronatalism. Now, it's like the problem with procreation, one of the many problems with procreation, is if you create a sentient being, if you create another human being, and they are unhappy with their life, then it's not just simply the case that they can end it. I mean, besides the fact that self-annihilation is an extremely difficult thing to do, it goes against our natural instincts, and you need a lot of courage to kill yourself, regardless of how bad your life gets. Besides that, you have to, reflect on the negative ramifications of killing yourself in relation to how it will impinge or impact upon those who are left behind. So it's like when you create a sentient being, you're putting the sentient being between a rock and a hard place. The rock is the hard life and the undesired life that they feel they've been burdened with as a result of people like you creating babies, so that they can feel good about themselves and meet some of their deprivational states. And so there's somebody who doesn't appreciate their lives and feels that they were imposed upon, that they have that on, and that represents the rock. And then the hard place is the fact that they know that if they take their own life, then they're impacting negatively upon loved ones. So, a potential would-be parent should factor that into consideration prior to taking it upon themselves to play God and create a sentient being. And just to conclude the video, this is a planet, okay? And this planet is absolutely devoid of sentience. Now, you see no problem with creating sentient life. Okay, so let's say, so it's completely barren of life, and you want to start populating this planet with sentient beings. And you can create 20 billion happily ecstatic human beings. But you know that if you do that, there will be one chronically depressed, suicidal person who will also be created. Now, if you went ahead and populated this planet with all those 20 billion happy people, my thoughts would go straight to that one victim that you've created, and I would hold you morally accountable for creating that one chronically depressed person when there was no need to, there was no deprivation of pleasant mental states on this planet, that you were the one who wanted to create that life. The desire to come into existence didn't originate from the psyche of the 20 billion people, 20 million people, because they didn't exist before you decided to create them. So you've created all this happiness in the universe, that didn't need to exist, and by doing so you've also created that one suicidal, depressed person. Now I would regard you as a complete and utter monster if you did that. But you're talking about creating sentient beings on a whim, on a one-on-one basis, and there's not even a guarantee that you're creating 20 billion happy people. So, this is why procreation is such a pernicious business, and why I'm so vehemently opposed to it. So I think I've given you some things to reflect upon there.